Well, in studio with me is Prince Derek Ajay, former Deputy CEO of the National Youth Authority Youth Enterprise Support Office of the President. We'll discuss the social contract with him. You're welcome to our desk this morning. Glad to have you here, though. The President said he's fulfilled all the promises he made in that 120-day social contract, which ended yesterday. Why is it that the COVID-19 levy is still on? And still we haven't seen the LI 2462 repealed. That hasn't been done, has it?
Well, governance is more processes than just events. And in terms of the social contract, I would want to give the President high marks, though I won't put percentages on it for now. I think the good people of Ghana are out there, the verdict is out there. Even the minority are giving him high marks.
That's what you said?
Yes.
Did you hear them say that?
Well, they mistakenly gave him 48 when they meant 84, but that's fine.
Well, that's what you are saying. But yes. I'm curious because the government was specific. The President said we're going to repeal LI 2462. Later we heard we're going to review it or amend it. But the promise was to repeal. That hasn't been done. Also, the COVID-19 levy was supposed to be scrapped. That hasn't been done. Why are those still in there?
Well, I believe you heard the President, specifically on the COVID-19, which everybody expects to be, as it were, scrapped with the others. All the others had been scrapped, that which he promised, except COVID-19.
And even the VAT too, there's still issues ongoing.
Well, I think that, let's be fair, we have an IMF program in place. And there are things that are tied to the IMF program. COVID-19 is one of them. And processes are underway to have it removed completely. I'm sure there will be a next budget reading and you would come to realize that the President has kept that promise, save the fact that we have to keep our promises with the IMF as well. But on the other one, that's the LI 2462, that gives the President or a President the right to allow for mining in the forest reserves and has been abused to include also water bodies. The steps have been taken, but I would want us to not start looking at things as to whether the President has done this or hasn't done this. How did it come into being is a starting point. Why should even such a law be contemplated? It is an aberration.
But if you go on that tangent, it's another conversation.
Yeah, I know.
The President knew how it came into being, but promised that it will be repealed. And that is what we have taken from him. And so if at this point, after his 120-day social contract, that hasn't been repealed, then we ask why.
Yes.
You haven't heeded to your own promise.
No, he's heeding to the promise. And I just wanted us to start from where it started from. You see, if you don't understand what the problem is, and then you assume that it's something that can just be taken away with a tick of a pen, then you're making a big mistake, all right? Recently, I mean, out of the 9 forests that had been taken over, all right, by galamseyers, and it wasn't just Ghanaian galamseyers. Because if you look at the 10,000 people who were flushed out of one settlement in one of the forest reserves, by a combined force of the military and other security services. It included nationals from all over West Africa, Burkina, Togo, everywhere. It actually shows you the extent of the problem that is being confronted Ghanaians, or the security services that is, and also the potential for that to destabilize even the country. You have people in the forests, people who could be dissidents of all kinds in there, doing all manner of crimes, prostitution, human trafficking and all that. These people have been flashed out. Now, note that people expected the President, day one, to declare a state of emergency. Day one, the President didn't even have ministers to start with. The government had not been formed. President has had 120 days, but most of his ministers have had much less. And then there are other agencies, there are boards. You know, government runs in a certain way. So if you take on a responsibility, you have to make sure that in fulfilling those promises, it doesn't become just an action that will bring further problems, all right? So, for example, the gold board that has been set up is all geared towards ensuring that you cut the bloodline, that's the money that they get from. Why do people mine or do galamsey? They are trying to get gold. But then they transmit or they transfer the gold into money. If you cut that, then you make it a disincentive for them to continue doing what they're doing. You're able to better manage and, as it were, monitor what is going on. So that's one. Two is that people have been laughing at the water guards. That's the people in the so-called yellow and whatever. I mean, they call them all sorts of derogatory names. And I think that that's not helpful. What Ghanaians as citizens, actually the media can do to help the government is to be supportive at the very least. These people, some people thought we're going to be going in there to fight with guns to remove the galamseyers. That is not their task. The Blue Water Guards are part of a comprehensive program that is ensure that our water bodies are kept safe beyond what the forest guards are doing with getting the forest. So there's going to be a lot of monitoring. There's going to be a lot of IT being deployed. The president had talked about AI and all that. We had a situation where drones were procured. We can't find them. But these technologies can be used effectively in ensuring that these things happen. And then the livelihood part also is very key, because if you get a situation where people are given alternative livelihoods, all right, or they are otherwise gainfully employed, then you can say that, okay, getting these people out of the forest would be getting them into the point where they can have alternatives. But if you bring them out and there are no employment opportunities out there, they will either go there or do other things, including crimes.
Prince, so are you telling me that you have to do all these things before that LI will be repealed? Because you see, the president is not a novice. He's been in government before. Obviously, he knows how government runs, you know, and he knew all that before he came out to say, at the end of 120 days, this is what I'm going to do. Look, he scrapped taxes, the e-levy and betting winnings, taxes on betting winnings and all that. Those were also going to take processes, obviously. I mean, when you say I'm going to scrap this, and it was announced at the budget reading, this was done, but then subsequent processes that had to get it done was done. Why is the president delaying to get the LI repealed? Within the 120-day social contract, he asked us to give him. I mean, we've given him his support by electing him into government in the first place for him to make those promises. And he was specific in a certain time frame. And so at the end, is it not only normal or natural that Ghanaians, you know, get him to be accountable to those promises?
Oh, yes, I agree with you in the main. And I think that not only has the president been in office as president before, he's been vice president, he's been minister, he's even been an assemblyman. He understands the governance, you know, structures from, you know, the bottom
from the very basics.
Yeah. So I agree with you. Now, number two is that he has an overwhelming majority in parliament, and therefore it should be easy for him to push things through, all right? Now, parliament is currently on recess. The expectation is that parliament will resume, that bills that have been put together, bills that are formulated not by the president himself, but by his ministers, okay, and his cabinet. And like I said, his ministers and cabinet is not 120 days old. President was sworn in on the 7th of January. And so he is 120 days old. His ministers, however, within 14 days, as he promised, he had his cabinet in place, including the ministers for environment, lands, and so on. And these have put in place documents, one of which was the repeal. One was revocation. But like I said, these are being put in place systematically in tandem with other policies that the government is implementing.
Right.
So we don't have a situation where we have a shock in the system. Assuming, and let's just be fair, assuming the president day one declared a state of emergency, okay? He didn't even have a defense minister. He didn't have any ministers, and said military. And he's the commander-in-chief, yes? So he says military, go in there, do whatever. Do you know what would have happened? Can you imagine just that one forest with 10,000? Now, assuming all those people were arrested, okay, and were sent to the courts, can the courts handle these things? Then there's the issue of deportations and so on that people have criticized. I agree that it will be fair that all who are arrested are prosecuted. But if you look at the reality, is it possible? How many of the 10,000, for example, could be prosecuted, and for over what period? Don't forget that we have thousands more of people who have stolen, plundered the wealth of this country, who also have to go through the same processes. The courts will be choked. And I think that you will agree with me that the public tribunals should be brought into being, special courts should be established to allow for a deplogging.
That is an issue for
and
debate,
that is
you know.
some of the things.
That's great. I'm still on Galamsey. I'll come back to you, but later today from 6 p.m., JoyNews will host a national dialogue on repealing the LI 42, and I've been joined by Glenn Asumening, who is Director of Operations at NDF. Glenn, I'm grateful for your time on our desk. What should we expect on this conversation? I mean, it's very, very debatable. The government says that they're in the process of getting it out, but a major militant against this is because Parliament is on recess, and so they can't get the bills through now. But I mean, this evening, what are you going to discuss?
Yeah, so thank you. I want us to take it from where we have come from. So, you know, the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussions on stopping galamsey, but we need to put it in context. So we know the galamsey that we've been used to, what, 50, maybe even 100 years, where people go with pickaxes and then shovels, you know, to try and get some soil from some rivers, or get some rocks. Sometimes they find their way into the concessions of the big mining companies, and then they bring it to, you know, their communities. If you go to Takwa, there's a community called Akon. You hear them pounding with pestles and metal mortars. You know, that kind of galamsey, that's what we knew. But when we say stop galamsey, or the new, you know, this new fight against galamsey, these are not really illegal people per se. These are people who have been permitted, you know, to mine. But the only challenge we've had is how the mining has been. So these are small-scale miners who work not only with pickaxes and shovels, but with machines, you know, big excavators. And this is where all the attention has been. Now, come to the issue around the LI. So we cannot pretend that there's not been any mining in our forest. There's been mining, you know, maybe more than 100 years. We've had some form of mining in our forest. It has been on a very small scale. We have some legal companies that are mining in some of our forests. The Newmont is one of them, mining in some forests in the Ahafo region. But what has happened, what we have seen in the last, so we did an assessment. We commissioned some researchers to do remote sensing, to tell us how the impact of mining on our forest resources, and realized that there has been a gradual increase, especially between 2020, 2021. We saw a big jump, and that big jump is a result of the gold prices.
Right.
You know, so we realized it matched the gold price. So the higher the price of gold went, the more people went into the forest, whether legally or illegally. Now, how have we operated? Where have we come from? We have worked with what we refer to as guidelines, and this is what EPA was using to manage the companies in the forest resources. Now, these guidelines sort of kept the status quo. You know, it got a system together. Then there was, you know, it was just a guideline, it didn't have any legal backing per se, even though the EPA was authorized to work with that guideline to make sure that sanity prevailed. Then we got the LI, which was supposed to give that guideline legal backing. But this is what happened. In the process of changing it from the guidelines to the law, what we realized was that certain things that kept the sanity, you know, that kept the system together, were either deliberately removed, or whether by force or was deliberate, nobody knows. So for instance, we said that of all the forests that we have in Ghana, we only allow 2% of production areas to be mined. And production areas are usually places where you know, the government would allow for mining, for timber.
Right.
Timber exploitation. This is just 2%. So if this is just a certain percentage of the forest, usually it can be 50%, it can be 60%, it can even be 70%. But out of that, we said we permit only 2% to be mined. When this law was made, that 2%, you know, limit was removed, and then other things were introduced, which now gave, for instance, the president the power to allocate any forest at all. And in Ghana, if you look at what we've done over the years, there are discussions around climate change. Because we have some tropical forests. Not all countries have that tropical forest. So because of our forests, we are able to say as a country that, for instance, we are going to commit our forests to make sure that there will be no degradation, no deforestation. And that will be our contribution to the fight against global warming, against climate change. But what has happened is that if you now permit the president alone to be able to give any place that he or she wants, you know, for mining, what are we doing?
Right.
So this, as we call it, we say that it has sort of, it is going to shock everything that we have done as far as forest management is concerned, climate change effort are concerned, everything. It was just going to bring everything to ground zero. So this is why we say this is a bad law. If you permit me to make a final point on this one. Now, before this law was, we had a few companies, the big companies do one or two things in the forest. Now, as soon as this law was passed, we saw all sorts of people. And let me give you one major forest which will surprise you. I mean, we were going to mine everything, including our own Kakum National Park. Our own Kakum National Park was going to be mined. And I also have other information which meant that more or less almost every forest reserve in Ghana was going to be mined. And we know what the issue is. This is where we find our rivers, the forest. In fact, the forest supports the whole of the forestry commission and the timber industry and all of that. If we allow this thing to go, what it means is that in a matter of 5-10 years, all of that industry will be gone. So we are creating jobs, we are finding money, and yet we are also degrading so many jobs and so much. So this is the reason why not just us, but all other stakeholders are concerned. We have our water bodies. This is where we have the sources of almost all our water bodies. If we touch them, I don't know, then that statement that people make that we start importing water.
Right.
We definitely. So this is why we are concerned.
And Glenn Asumeni is Director of Operations of Nature and Development Foundation. He will be joined by other panelists this evening for our dialogue on repealing LI 2462, uniting voices to protect Ghana's forest and water bodies. Thank you so much, Glenn, and definitely make a date this evening with our panelists. Well, I still have in the studio with me Prince, and just before I let you off, Prince, has government tracked these promises that they say they fulfill to know the impact it's had directly on Ghanaians? Right.
Colleague Erastus has been doing a fine job, and I think you would agree that government did a very fine job with him being put on the fact-finding team of the Minister for Lands, Forestry and Mineral Resources. And so he's able to now go with the aid of military, etc., to go and do the fact-finding, as opposed to previously where he goes and under fire, military are rather helping the Galamseyers. That will come 360 degrees. So let's give some credit where it's due. And I think that with the tracking of the excavators, as opposed to selling excavators, now putting all excavators on the registry and being tracked is another sure way that the government is going to ensure that all this ban and so on happen. Now, to the tracking of the promises. I'm sure without tracking them, the president couldn't have given himself the percentage that he gave himself. Some people didn't look at the keywords like initiate, commence, provide seed money. These are keywords. A promise is a promise. The wording of the promise is also very important. So if I promise to provide seed money for women's banking and I put about 51 million as seed money, I fulfilled the promise. Some people want to see a building there with Women's World Banking on it before they know that, oh, the promise has been fulfilled. So there are little things that are there, but the devil is in the detail.
So just to emphasize on that, or the concerns that people are raising on that particular promise, is it that government has just earmarked the seed money? Now, people are not able to access it. They need it. So when then is the bank going to start operating for people to be able to access them? And that's how come they'll be able to feel that the promise has been fulfilled in their lives. That hasn't been done. You
see, a team has been put in place to ensure that this is actualized, and the team is working. Even yesterday, I'm sure you had a new team has been put in place for a national airline. They also include very seasoned people, and they are going to actualize these.
Has the same been done for the bank? No.
For the what?
For the bank.
Same has been done.
The board has been set up?
You're in the media, you should be telling the public. Yes, it has been.
It has been set up. So these ones have been set up, seed money done, but the bank hasn't started operating. They haven't received money yet. Do you know when that will start?
When appropriations are made for any budget, it's assumed that the money is available. And so, yes, it is. Now, I mean, I'm particularly very excited about a number of sectors, including the youth sector. I mean, I've been in charge of the youth sector for 8 years under President Mills and Mahama. And then I was part of the people who drafted the policy. So I can see its implementation being done. And I'm super excited because one of the key things was to have a standalone youth ministry. Now we have it for youth empowerment and so on. It allows for the aggregation of all the policy objectives in one place, one-stop shopping, and I can see the Jumurara and other policies coming in place. In fact, the Jumurara is more of an improved version of what we started with the Youth Enterprise Support at the Office of the President in 2014, which name was changed to National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Plan under the NPP. I think that this president is focused on ensuring that he does not only deliver, but he impacts and leaves a legacy for Ghana. And I think that we should be excited. The oral, for me, is the ultimate.
Right.
Corruption starts not only with former appointees or ends with them. Yes, we do know that the scandals under the President Adu-Boahene administration was just out of this world. And so there must be prosecutions to serve as a deterrent. But the code of conduct for his ministers and appointees and the expansion of the frontiers of the financial management, laws to not just, home in on the finance minister if he exceeds a certain threshold, but to attack every minister, every appointee, and even bring it down to the grassroots level is a sure way of ensuring that we keep track of the pest and ensure that nobody plunders it, so there'll be enough to go around for the implementation of all the other things. Note that this president did not inherit a gold mine.
Great.
He has inherited poverty.
Right.
Because of the looting and plundering.
Just before I let you off, I just need a yes or no answer on this question. I'm veering off a little bit. The asset declaration of government appointees, the deadline was yesterday, Wednesday. Have they declared their assets now? Do you know?
Have they?
Yes. Who? Those who haven't declared, have they declared now?
Do you know those who have not declared?
Have they declared now? I just need a yes or no answer.
My assumption is that they would have. And so my answer will be a yes. And the president did indicate that if the answer is a no for anyone, the president is automatically out. So we take the president on his word. And this president is one who is trustworthy, one who delivers on his promises, one who does not just talk for the fun of it, but one has a legacy to deliver. And I'm sure Ghanaians should support him all the way so we can have a better situation going forward.
Thank you so much, Prince. It's been exciting to have you on our desk this morning. We're grateful for the updates.
Well, thank you too, and we look forward to a better Ghana.
Indeed, we do.